All right, it is officially NBA draft week, and I thought I would give and share, excuse me, my top 30 big board of the top 30 prospects in this year's NBA draft. Um, I will go through my top 30, and I also ranked my top 60. So, who I believe the 60 players that should get drafted. Um, and yeah, I guess we'll just jump right into it. Number one, obviously a lot of talk. It's pretty consensus that people have Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Paulo Banchero in one of those orders. I may not. We'll get to that later. But at the top of the leaderboard, I have Jabari Smith. When I watched him play at Auburn last year, I just saw very few weaknesses. His ball handling probably would be the first one that people would point to. But he is 6'10" and he's only 18 years old, so that can clearly improve. But just his intangibles make him, I think, the have the highest. He has the highest floor of the three um, top guys. Um, by any means, I don't think he's as elite of a prospect as a guy like Zion or Luca or guys like that. Cade Cunningham, even I don't think he's that good. But I really think he has the potential to be a number one option on a winning team, and I think he has a higher potential uh than Chet and Paulo to do that. He's an elite shooter for being 6'10". Free throw percentage is typically a number uh that projects better to the next level. And Jabari shot 80% from the free throw line. I believe he shot over 40% from three. Super athletic. He's got that great closer last year for Auburn. He's got the mid range, got the 3-point game, got the athleticism. His game reminds me a lot of Jason Tatum, and I think he can have a similar career arc. Number two on my list. Anyone who follows me on Twitter, anyone who knows me knows I am the biggest Chet Holmgren fan in the world. I love Chet's game. He is the best high school basketball player that I've seen play live. He's one of the best basketball players I've seen play live. He does things that I personally have just not seen another basketball player be able to do in my lifetime. Everyone points to that he's skinny. I don't think his weight drastically impacts his current status as a prospect. If he adds weight, that obviously would be a positive. Um, but what impresses me most is his defensive IQ. He uses his length so much to an advantage that making his lack of strength and weight hardly even matter. Um, that you could obviously show me clips where it does matter, but over a long period of time, over the whole season, his length and ability to recover on defensive positions, defensive rotations, and his just defensive versatility to be able to switch on the wings and not be overwhelmed. And if he does get past, he has the length to catch up, and it's just something that I've not seen from any defender in my lifetime. He's the best shot blocker. It just his shot blocking just leaves me. In high school is a little different. His level of competition, obviously, but whenever I watched him in high school, every time I'm just like, I thought he kept getting better, and he leaves me. His defense leaves me speechless. It's just so fun to watch. Um, I haven't even talked about his offense. He has just great ball handling for how tall he is. Um, great 3-point shooting for how tall he is. I think that game will only get better on that side of the floor. Um, there's really not been a player like him, so I'm very curious to see how he develops. I compared him to Pau Gasol. I really don't like that comparison at all, to be honest. Maybe a more modern version of Pau Gasol, but I think he has the potential to be a number one option, maybe. I don't really even know if he does, but like I really don't know where he fits in the NBA. I think he could be an all-star. He could be an all NBA guy. There's no he has he's as good of a defender as Rudy Gobert in my eyes, but Chet's not going to get run off the floor on offense. So if he realizes that his defense is going to be what gets him paid, and if he's able to add that 15 points a game, hit 40% of his threes on offense, it just if you get a Rudy Gobert level defender that can stretch the floor and not get exposed offensively, that player is going to be very, very, very valuable in the NBA. And I think that's what Chet can do. And I think that's worth the number 2 pick in my eyes. Number 3, shock to some people. You probably saw it as I was talking about Chet. I have Shaden Sharp, um, who played, who was on the Kentucky team for half a semester last year, didn't really play at all. Played for Dream City Christian Academy in Arizona, maybe. Not 100% sure what state that was in again. He played at a few different high schools, so he jumped around, but I think he's the wild card of the draft. He was the number 1 player in the 22 class and then reclassified to 21 and joined Kentucky in the second semester. Um, it's just watching him play. He reminds me of so much of Paul George. He has that same athleticism, same feel for the game. He's still obviously incredibly raw, excuse me. But NBA prospects nowadays are very raw and sometimes drafting on that potential. Guy like Anthony Edwards, who didn't look very consistent in college, drafting on his potential, what he can be, is sometimes better. And I think Shaden Sharp has a higher potential than Paulo Banchero. And I'm banking that his athleticism will be able to um, help him see the floor early in his career. And then I think his shooting and playmaking are going to continue to develop. And he has an interesting ceiling because who knows? Maybe 5-6 years from now, we'll look back and say he's the best player in this draft. I'm very interested to see his situation, which is going to matter a ton. But I see him as the 3rd best player in this draft. Number 4, who some people have as high as 1, 2, 3, is Paulo Banchero. I'm lower on him than most. He was very dominant at Duke, probably the most dominant player in college basketball. But I think he relied on his physical size a little too much, in my opinion. I think he still has room to grow in pure skill refinement, like I said. Um, and he has definitely room to grow defensively. He's heavy footed sometimes, and he's slow on rotation sometimes and looks a little disinterested. Something that's common with a lot of guys in college. So if you're a Paulo fan, you can definitely convince me that that's going to come along. But I personally just don't think he could be a number 1 option on a winning team. And I'm not sure how elite of a number 2 option he could be. He's a guy that I could see making like 3 or 4 all-star games, maybe having 1 or 2 years on an all NBA team. But I just don't think he's much better than that. Like Julius Randle, I could see him having a very similar career. And that's why I'm lower on him than most. Number 5, Jaden Ivey. Guys, some people, rare, might be in the top 3. Kind of that consensus next tier guy. A lot of people have him over Shaden Sharp, but he might be the only guy more athletic than Sharp in the draft, in my eyes. A lot of people compared him to Ja Morant, and he has that level of athleticism, but just far, far from that level of decision making. He has so much room to grow there. There are times at Purdue where he looked like he was an elite option, elite offensive player. And then there's just other times where his decision making struggles. So his athleticism, in my eyes, warrants the top 5 selection. And I think he can only get better. I could see him having a very similar career to Victor Oladipo, minus the injuries, hopefully. If Oladipo wasn't injured, we could be looking at maybe a 5-time All-Star, guy who made 1 All-NBA team. I could see Ivy having a similar career path. Next is Benedict Mathurin from Arizona, one of my favorite guys. Just that classic, just gets buckets. He's just a smart player, and I really enjoyed watching him play last year. I watched a lot of Arizona. Um, I just think he has a very high floor. I think he's going to find the NBA court. He knows what he's doing. He's going to carve out a role early in his career. I don't think he has as high of a ceiling as the guys ahead of him. Kind of why I have him at this point. Um, he doesn't have the athleticism that Jaden Ivey has. He doesn't have the Paulo or Chet size or Jabari size, and he doesn't have the Shaden Sharp athleticism. But he's a good basketball player. He's a really, really good basketball player, much like Bradley Beal. I could see him having a very similar career. I like that comparison. Um, 8-time All Star, maybe one All NBA team, guy like that. That's why he falls at 6 for me. Number 7, Keegan Murray. A lot of guys think he might be better than Paulo. I've seen that before. Might be better than Jabari Smith. Um, he was the best offensive player in college basketball last season. I said Paulo was the most dominant because he made it look more dominant, but statistically, it was Keegan Murray. Um, he really has very few flaws. He has super long arms, great size for the position. He's a really solid defender. I don't think he'll ever be on an all NBA defensive team. I could be wrong, but step out, hit the 3, 6'9". He can be a small ball 5. Um, Good passer, just a really solid all around offensive player. A lot like Pascal Siakam. Love that comparison. Could see him having a very similar career. Number 8 on mine, Mark Williams, center from Duke. Ideally, this is who I want the Timberwolves to get, but I don't know if he will be at 19. A little too optimistic. He is one of the more interesting players in this draft. Watching him at Duke, it almost seemed like he was more 6'11", 7-foot guy, but he measured in at 7'2", which would make him one of the taller players in the NBA. He's an elite rim protector. If Chet, Walker Kessler, Mark Williams, all those guys are on the same level for shot blocking, I think Chet's above personally, but those were the 3 best shot blockers in college basketball last season. And Mark Williams, great lob catcher, really a modern NBA big guy. Right now, he might project as like that 5th starter, like Kevon Looney, Robert Williams, um, Maxi Kleba, thinking of guys that were just in the NBA playoffs. But I think that's his floor. But I think he has the potential to extend his range and be a little more involved offensively. And if he does that and improves his jump shooting, he could really be a steal in this draft. And that just raises his potential drastically. But I just don't know how likely that is. Robert Williams, like I said, could have a very similar career to him. All right, this is where it gets a little interesting. I start deferring from where most people have these guys. Jaden Hardy, guard from the G League Ignite, probably the most disappointing player last season for a draft prospect. Entered the year probably top 5 hype. He was the number 2 player in the 2021 high school class, but he really struggled in the G League. I think he hit less than 30% of his threes. But at this point of the draft, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think any of these guys are sure things. I would be pretty shocked if any of these top 8 guys are not at least like starting level NBA players. I think the top 8 is really solid, but I'm going to be honest with you. The next 22, if any of these guys aren't starting level NBA players, I wouldn't be shocked. But so at this point, I think Jaden Hardy has the highest potential of anyone left on the board. And as we've seen with guys like recently, like Tyrese Maxey, who struggled in college, but he was a high level recruit, those guys have it in them and they just need a good situation, a good coach. Maybe Jaden Hardy, 18 years old, going pro. Maybe he was a guy you should have went to college. Maybe you made the wrong decision. So if he lands in a situation like maybe the Spurs or the Thunder, some of these teams that have a lot of first round picks that don't need him to do a lot quickly, the Thunder might, but they got so many guys. I never know with them. But I compared him to Karis LeVert. I could see him having a very similar career. A lot of people comparing him to Bradley Beal. A lot of all over the place. Some guys don't think he's a first round pick. But at this point in the draft, I'm banking on him. Number 10, Malachi Branham from Ohio State. I think he might be the best shooter, pure shooter in this draft. Shot almost 42% from three, 83.3 from the free throw line. He reminds me a lot of Chris Middleton. This might be a little optimistic, but he is one of my favorite prospects in this draft. Uh, Kind of a surprise one and done guy. I believe he went to St. Vincent, St. Mary, same high school as LeBron. Um, I really like Malachi Branham. I think he's worth a lottery pick. Not sure if he goes there. Um, Pretty sure he's a surefire first rounder. Seen him as low as the 20s. Some have him in the lottery, but I really like his potential. I think he could be a steal in this draft. At 11, Dyson Daniels, a guy that a lot of people have in the top 10, did really good in the pre-draft and the draft combine. Has prototypical guard size, 6'6", really smart basketball player. Um, Kind of reminds me of the mold of like a Josh Giddey last year. I don't see his potential that high. Um, a lot like Derek White. Derek White was like a 18-point per game scorer on the Spurs. Obviously, not a very good team. We saw how good he can be at times with the Celtics this year. I could see Dyson Daniels being a very similar type player. AJ Griffin, another guy from Duke. A lot of people see him as maybe a lottery pick, maybe top 10, maybe the 20s. He certainly looks the part. He looks like an NBA basketball player. He very good. He's in very good shape. Looks very strong. Already has an NBA body. Um, he nearly was 50, 40, 90 last year as a shooter. So that's 50 from the field, 40 from three, 90 from the free throw line. But yeah, at worst, I think he's just a 3 and D player. But he did have a lot of injuries in high school. I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but I think he had knee issues. So that is not ideal. I could see him having a career like TJ Warren, but those injuries have him a little lower on my board. Nevertheless, I think he's great value in the lottery and to be able to carve out a pretty solid NBA career. Kennedy Chandler, he reminds me a lot of Tyrese Maxey. Maybe not as gifted of a scorer, but he had a very similar freshman season as Maxey did when he was at Kentucky. I really liked watching him play when he was at Tennessee. He's only 6'1", which really hurts him. If he was 6'4", I might have him at number 9. Um, and he's not a true point guard, not a true shooting guard, really classic combo guard, a lot like Tyrese Maxey. But I think he has the instincts and the shooting ability and athleticism to make up for his 6'1" size. And I think he's going to carve out a role on an NBA team very early in his career. And I think he could be another steal in this draft. Ousmane Dieng is a guy a lot of people are putting in the top 10. This year's foreign guy who's making a big jump second half of the draft process. Not many people were talking about him in the fall, in the early winter. A lot of people talking about him now. He played in the NBL for the New Zealand Breakers, the same team that RJ Hampton played for a few years ago. He's the first guy to go to the NBL. LaMelo Ball played in the NBL. Pretty solid league. Not as good as the Euro League, obviously, but one of the better foreign basketball leagues. Dieng is the classic foreign prospect. He has insane potential, super long arms. Probably's got like a 7'3" wingspan, 6'10", guard skills. But he wasn't consistent. Didn't even average 10 points a game in the NBL. Obviously, a professional basketball league, so a little bit different than these college and G League guys. G League is professional, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I could see Jiang. It just fit's going to matter a ton. I compared him to Andrew Wiggins. Watching him, he just has such a similar game as Warriors Andrew Wiggins, where He's really good 3 and D player. I don't think he can be a number 1 or 2 option, but I think he could be a really solid number 3 option on a winning team. Um, but he has super high potential, so I still think he's worth a lottery pick in my eyes. EJ Liddell, another guy I love in this draft. I would love for the Timberwolves to get him. At 6'7", he's a bit undersized to be a classic big guy in the NBA. Has the size of more of a 3, but he played more 4 or 5 in college. A lot like this modern Grant Williams, PJ Tucker, small ball 5, because EJ Liddell has really long arms. He's built like an NBA player already. I think he can play small ball 4 or 5 and do very well at the level of a Grant Williams or PJ Tucker. And he has the shooting ability to do the same. I just think guy like the Timberwolves, EJ Liddell would be a perfect fit. And I think he's definitely worth a pick in the teens in my eyes. Jeremy Sohan, another very interesting prospect. He might be one of the best on-ball defenders in the entire draft. He honestly might be the best. Mark Williams, really good secondary, and Chet Holmgren. So I think behind Chet Holmgren, Jeremy Sohan's the best defender in the draft. But he really struggled to shoot the ball last year. Didn't even shoot 60% from the free throw line. Shot, I believe, around 30% from 3. But his shot looks good. So if he definitely has room to improve. I could see him having a very similar career to Aaron Gordon now on the Nuggets, a really solid 3rd or 4th option. But that is projecting because his shot right now is not at an NBA level. But if it improves, he could be. We could look back and be like that guy should have been a top 10 pick lock. He has the athletic potential and defensive potential to be a really good 2-way player in the NBA. Next on my list is Johnny Davis, guard from Wisconsin. He's a player I'm lower on than most. I would say the consensus has him in the lottery, so I'm not too far behind. But he's a really solid 2-way guard. I think he has a high floor, but I just don't see like his potential is so much lower than a Jaden Hardy, an AJ Griffin, a Malachi Branham. I just don't know like where he can improve, to be honest. He's a really good basketball player, but I don't see how much better he can get, and that's why he falls a little bit for me. Gary Trent Jr., though, who's really carved out a role on the Raptors, 16 point per game guy. That I could see Johnny Davis doing that, but I don't think he's ever going to be an all-star. I don't think I would be shocked if he ever was an all-star. But these guys like AJ Griffin, Malachi Branham, Jaden Hardy, they got to. I'm not saying I think they're going to be, but the chances of them being an all-star ahead of Johnny Davis is much more likely in my eyes. Next on my board is Jalen Duren, classic throwback center, jacked out of his mind, huge 6'10". But I think that's really all he is he's a throwback center. He can catch lobs, he can play really solid defense, really solid rim protector. But today's modern NBA, I don't know how well he's going to switch on screens and keep up with guards. So I don't know if that's worth a top 10, 15 pick where some people have him. He plays so much like a prime Tyson Chandler, but I don't know how successful Tyson Chandler would be in today's NBA because there's not many guys like him. I really liked watching him play in college. I just don't know if he's going to be able to have a role right away in the NBA because he's not a very good shooter. He can't extend the floor, and he's not a very good ball handler. Just a classic NBA old school big man. I still think that's worth a top 20 pick. You see guys like a Robert Williams, like a Brook Lopez, but Brook Lopez has extended his range, leading into my next guy, Walker Kessler, who I think reminds me so much of Brook Lopez. He does really the 2 things that you need to do as a big man to find the floor today. He rim protects and he's extended his range to 3. Excuse me, but he was a the best shot blocker in the country statistically last season. He averaged like 4 blocks a game or something insane. And he wasn't a great shooter last year, kind of his first year shooting threes. So I think that's only going to get better. But he could really have a similar career to Brook Lopez. Another guy I would definitely not mind the Timberwolves getting. Um, be a great guy early in his career, throw up off the bench, get you 10, 15 minutes a game in the regular season. Don't know if he's a playoff type player yet, but I think he can mold into a player like Brook Lopez. Um, Next on my list, Jalen Williams, forward from Santa Clara, another guy who's a very late riser. In the winter, no one was talking about this guy as a first round pick. Now he's getting even some lottery hype. Um, but he was a very late bloomer. Only got better at Santa Clara. He led them in assists, I believe, the past 2 years. Really good offensive basketball player. He knows what he's doing. He's a solid shooter, really long defensively. Robert Covington, I could see him having a very similar career, play a long time in the NBA. And that, in my eyes, a guy like Robert Covington is way more worth, or he's totally worth the top 20 pick. Next on my list, Tari Eason, another guy I love Timberwolves have been connected to. I'd love if they got him. Statistically, he was one of the most efficient offensive players in college basketball last season. He only trailed Keegan Murray in offensive box plus minus, a stat that I like to look at that kind of dictates how valuable a player is compared to the average, almost like win shares or wins above replacement. But terrific two-way forward potential, 6'8" guy, shoot the three, defend well, handle the ball, a lot like a Jeremy Grant on the. He's now on the Pistons. Could see him having a very similar career. Next on my list is Bryce McGowan's guard from Nebraska. This is a very projecting pick. He was not very consistent last year at Nebraska. He was all over the place. He had some games where he looked like he could be a lottery player, came in with a lot of hype. He was a 4-star recruit. But I'm banking on his potential at 6'6". He has really like traditional guard skills and he plays like a point guard. But he really is just all over the place. So I'm banking that he's going to put it all together. He has all the traits, all of the athleticism to do it. I could see him having a career like a Malik Beasley. If his shot comes around, he could be a steal at this point in the draft. Ochai Agbaji, next on my list. Guys, some people have in the lottery. I don't see him that high in my eyes. He was one of the best players in college basketball last season, but he was one of the oldest. He's also 22. I just don't know how much he's going to improve. And last year in the national championship game, he played well. I think he had around probably like 16 points, but I remember in the first half, he kind of like disappeared. And if you're disappearing in the national championship against North Carolina, I don't know how you're going to carve out a role very early for the Charlotte Hornets. A lot of people think he has a high floor, and I do too, but I don't think it is as sure thing as some people think. I could see him having a career like a Jay Crowder, kind of be that fifth starter for your team, played 15 years in the NBA. But his shot wasn't super consistent throughout his career. So I don't know how likely that is, but nevertheless, still worth a top 25 pick in my eyes. Next on the list, Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, Jovic, but he also is from Serbia. He forward on Mega Basket of the Euro League. Another high potential European prospect. Guard skills, 6'10", elite length, still incredibly raw though. He has a lot of room to grow defensively, a lot of room to grow with a jump shot. But you're not going to find many guys with higher potential at this point of the draft. So I could see him eventually carving out a career like a Danilo Gallinari, but he still has ways to go to get to that point. But definitely worth a pick in the late first round, just based on solely on the potential that he has. Next on my list, Patrick Baldwin Jr., forward from Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Very interesting player. He's one of the highest rated high school prospects in the 2021 class. But he opted to play for his father at UW Milwaukee in the Horizon League. So he wasn't getting the same level of competition as a Jabari Smith or Paulo Banchero, and he was injured all year, and he just struggled to put together good game film. But like for the same reason as a guy like Jaden Hardy or a lot of guys at this point of the draft, he has the potential that other guys don't. Some other guys like I don't know, we'll get into that later, but he has potential that is worth a first round pick in my eyes. He had a very weird combine that he didn't even have like a 30-inch vertical, but very interesting prospect. I'm very curious to see how his career plays out. But if I'm sitting in the GM chair picking in the late 30s, he's definitely on the short list of guys that I would look at because you just can't find that potential from many other guys. Like Jalen Williams, a guy who I think is going to be an NBA player for 10 years at least, but he has nowhere near the potential of a Patrick Baldwin Jr. Patrick Baldwin Jr. could be out of the league in 3 years and playing in Serbia, but he could also make an All-Star game. He has that level of skill. I have no idea. But he's worth the pick at 25. But as for Jalen Williams, he was one of the best defensive players in college basketball last season. Very good on ball, big man. Led college basketball in charges drawn. High motor. You hear that term a lot. Definition of a high motor defensive guy. He just knows what he's doing. High IQ. He's got the offensive game. He carved out a role like a Grant Williams, like a PJ Tucker, like a Kevon Looney. Get you 10 and 10 every once in a while, but he's a guaranteed 8 and 8, and he won't turn the ball over. And he'll be able to guard defensively, which is very valuable. And like I could just see this guy playing on the floor in a big time NBA playoff game. So that's worth a first round pick in my eyes. Next, a lot of the same reasons. Not a high potential guy, not a Patrick Baldwin Jr. Colin Gillespie from Villanova. We've seen guys like Peyton Pritchard and TJ McConnell carve out long NBA careers after being a veteran college basketball player for a long time. And there's just not many players in this draft that are smarter than Colin Gillespie. His decision making is terrific. The only thing that concerns me is the injuries that he had at the back end of his career. If those don't bother him and if he's able to get over those, I think he's more than worth a first round pick, and he could be a backup point guard for 15 years in the NBA. Next on the list, Trevor Keels, guard from Duke. The third Duke player or fourth, whatever. But he had some lottery hype early in the season. But he struggled with consistency and a few injuries at the end of the year. Like I say, he has great physical tools and potential. Like his teammate AJ Griffin already is built physically for the NBA. Trevor Keels, I feel like could get in a little better shape. He reminds me of like he has like a Kyle Lowry type build. He's way taller. Kyle Lowry's probably 6'2", Keels like 6'6", but you know what I mean, that he's built like Kyle Lowry. He could have a similar career to Lou Dort. He has that two-way potential. Maybe not have shown it very consistently, but I still think he's worth a flyer at the end of the first round. JD Davison might have been one of my favorite players to watch in college basketball last year, but also one of the most frustrating. I watched a lot of Alabama last year. I don't know why. It just ended up being on the TV a lot for me. He was all over the place. And Bryce McGowan's was all over the place. JD Davison was 10 times more. There'd be times that you're like, wow, this dude should be like a top 10 pick. He has that level of speed at like Russell Westbrook type athleticism. Like honestly, he's that level of speed, athleticism, jumping, but he might have the worst decision making in the entire draft. He made some plays that I'm like, have you ever played basketball before? But if he improves that even half, and if he's able to be a smarter player, which If I was a GM, I'd draft smart players. Those are the ones that usually work out compared to the trait guys. But there's there might not be anyone in the draft with the speed that JD Davison has with the ball in his hands. His crazy hair might make him look like he goes faster. But I could see him having a career like Chris Dunn, even though Chris Dunn's been a big disappointment. He's still a backup point guard. Might be able to fill in as a starter every once in a while. But again, he has not many guys at this point in the draft have his potential. And then rounding out the first round for me is Christian Coloco, center from Arizona. Much like Mark Williams, Walker Kessler, Jalen Duren, fits that mold of the classic lob catching, uh, rim protecting big man. He really improved from uh, going into last year compared to the year before. He made a massive jump, and if that continues, he could be a great rotational big man. I think his ceiling to Clint Capella, but I think he has a little lower floor than a Jalen Duren or Walker Kessler. Not really a threat at all offensively, other than catching lobs. But I still think that's worth a first round pick because sometimes you need to throw a guy out there like that. As we noticed in the NBA, the Warriors were missing kind of a backup guy like that a few times, but so worth a first round pick in my eyes. And then um, a few second round picks that I just wanted to touch on. I just updated the list. So, yep, there we go. So Ryan Rollins, very interesting player. I kind of wanted to put him in my top 30, but I didn't. A guy from Toledo that continues to improve, continues to get better. Really good shooter, really good combo guard, wing, decision maker. But he played at Toledo. He's a guy who might see sneak into the end of the first round. Could have a really long NBA career, but also could. That's why he's a second rounder for me. But he's a guy I'm very interested to follow. Christian Brown from Kansas, another guy, really good shooter, two-way potential. Could have a career like Kyle Korver, maybe. Um, JJ Redick, that's obviously on the high end. That's why I didn't put him in the first round. I don't think he will, but there's a chance he could. Blake Wesley, a guy I've seen as high as the lottery. Marjan Beauchamp, another guy who's getting first round hype. Kendall Brown, Minnesota, East Ridge fame. Dalen Terry, Jason Terry's nephew, I believe, or son. Um, Interesting player, David Roddy, another Minnesota guy from Breck High School. I really enjoy his game. Um, the reason that he was able to go pro is because of guys like PJ Tucker and Grant Williams. That is what he projects to be exactly. He has that level of build, frame, everything. I think he has a chance to do that. See, he only continues to get better, and I could see him sneak into the back end of the first round. But really an interesting player. Josh Minot, forward from Memphis, some very he projects very well analytically. I've seen a lot of people really high on him, but he didn't play much at Memphis. Just an interesting player. Andrew Nemhart. Anyone knows me? I'm a big Gonzaga guy. Loved watching him play. But just a classic second rounder. Flash things at times, but just not consistent enough. Um, Kenneth Lofton Jr., forward from Louisiana Tech. Really interesting player. You'll see him play. You're like, how is this guy going to be in the NBA? He's a little overweight, but a really skilled post player. He knows exactly how to make room in the post, how to, one of the smartest guys, really knows positions well. Very interested to watch his career. And then I thought I'd touch on Ty Washington, a guy that I've seen as high as like 15, and I just don't see it at all. Um, he was injury prone last year at Kentucky. Doesn't seem very athletic, not an elite shooter. Um, just seems like an average college point guard in my eyes. I don't really get the uh, lottery hype, top half of the first round hype. I don't get that. I'll gladly eat my words if I'm wrong, but I don't see him as a first round pick. He's a guy that I've heard rumored to go to the Timberwolves. I would not be very happy if they got him. Um, Last guy to touch on Brady Manick from UNC. Um, Guy, if I'm an NBA GM, drafts around winding down, I'm picking late 50s. Look at Brady Manick. He might be a two-way player type of guy, but I could see him being carving out a really solid NBA career. And I think he's worth a second round pick. But yeah, that's all I got. I love the NBA draft. I can't wait for Thursday. One of my favorite days on the sports calendar. Like I said, my top guys are the Timberwolves. Mark Williams, way too optimistic, but I love Tari Eason, EJ Liddell, Jeremy Sohan. I'd even like Walker Kessler was the one I said. Jalen Williams, second round guy, I'd love him to go after. Colin Gillespie, second round guy, I'd love him to go after. But yeah, I'm excited for the draft. Really exciting year of prospects, kind of the top three, top four everyone's talking about. I don't see that elite, surefire, uh, all NBA guy like a Cade Cunningham or Zion Williamson as years in the past, but Jabari Smith's my number one guy. I got Jabari Smith, Chet, Shaden Sharp, Paulo, Jaden Ivey. That's my top five. I appreciate you listening. And Thursday cannot come soon enough.